Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast. We're going to go through the news of the week tonight. Thanks to the members at grandtheftworld.com. They make us possible. They make us commercial free. And if you enjoy the show, please consider becoming a member over there because you want to meet the others. It's for your benefit as much as ours. All right. So this past week, we have a lot of things to cover. We have some stories that are going to be the miscellaneous stories. We'll have those up front. Then we'll get into the political section with Kamala and her week in promoting her political campaign in the downward direction, which I thought was an interesting strategy, but maybe it's a feign, maybe it's a fake move, maybe they have some other card up their sleeve for October surprise. We're heading into the last week of the month. But on the flip side, you had a bunch of activities from Trump this past week. He just spoke at Madison Square Garden earlier today. He also did the Joe Rogan podcast on Friday, which garnered, I don't know, like 26 million views in the first 24 hours just on YouTube. And that's not his main platform. So a lot of people have been digesting that, and they may have had their expectations set quite a ways above where it was delivered, but it was still a solid interview, 3-hour conversation. I really didn't expect it to go that long, but when I got done with work, 3 a.m. Saturday morning, I looked and there's a 3-hour interview, 2 hour, 58 minutes with Donald Trump and Rogan. And I had trouble going to sleep right away because I wanted to listen to part of it. So I was able to catch most of that yesterday while we were preparing to have some people here and do some entertaining of guests. And yeah, I mean, it was I thought a solid interview. They talked a lot of interesting things. I think there were so many things they could have talked about. He probably just needs to go back for a second interview. That'll help out. Kamala, for some reason, turned down the Joe Rogan podcast, though she was in Texas the same day that Trump was. She said she couldn't make it fit in her schedule. So I would give that a priority check. If you can't make time for the biggest podcast in the world, you might not want to win the election as far as that goes. Anyway, we're going to take a look at that electile dysfunction of the past week, but we also have international stories from Israel, and we also have some P. Diddy stories that now have branched out into the Abercrombie and Fitch former CEO was arrested not just for sex trafficking, but also the raping of his models. And that's a theme because Abercrombie used to be owned by Les Wexner's company, The Limited, which ties back into all of these things from One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb. So we're going to have to get into those stories, but it'll be later on in the podcast because we do that in the wee hours of the morning. For now, let's go to Luke Brodowski of wearechange.org and thebestpoliticalshirts.com, and let's get his report from earlier today.
Well, that endorsement didn't work out like they thought it would.
That's why I'm voting for Kamala Harris. She helped lead the most significant...
You would think they would at least clean up the baby oil, and that poor guy had no option there. But you, as the American people, do, as soon we will be deciding the next president of the United States, as overwhelmingly a lot of people are showing their support for Donald Trump and highly criticizing Kamala Harris, who looks like she's not doing too well. As even according to the corporate media, they are admitting the truth in front of our eyes, very surprisingly, that she's doing really bad, especially in light of the Joe Rogan podcast episode that Donald Trump sat for 3+ hours for, while also doing a major Madison Square Garden event today. On the other side, we got a lot of celebrity endorsements. Now, what is in store for us in the next few coming days and more importantly, weeks after the election? Well, that's something that, of course, we're going to be discussing here as well. As even corporatist establishment political shill Frank Luntz came out on CNN, an individual described as the Nostradamus of pollsters that described how specifically it was the moment when Kamala Harris decided to focus on Donald Trump. It's exactly when she froze right after having the, quote, best 60 days of any presidential candidate in modern history, as he's specifically describing the moment when she turned anti-Trump as the major turning point, the major moment where she just started to lose this election.
And then the moment that she turned anti-Trump and focused on him and said, don't vote for me, vote against him, that's when everything froze. And the fact is, Donald Trump is defined. He's not gaining, he's not losing, he is who he is, and his vote is where it is. She is less well-defined, and if she continues just to define this race as vote against Trump, she's going to stay where she is now, and she may lose.
A major admission from someone that really doesn't want Donald Trump to win on a network that really doesn't want him to win as well. As CNN also had their own data analyst describe how Donald Trump is on course to even win the popular vote, something that is very rare for Republicans and something that a lot of people don't expect to happen and would signal a major cultural and political landslide victory in the United States if that actually does happen. As the Republicans only won one popular vote back in 1988, as he would be the first Republican to win the popular vote in 20 plus years, and only the second one in 36 years, as the demographics of this country overwhelmingly highlight a majority of people on the Democratic liberal side, as only through the Electoral College and the delegate system, a system that can be finagled, a system that, of course, is going to be the major deciding factor with who is going to be the president of the United States, as of course a lot of people are backing away from Kamala Harris, including even, of course, Jeff Bezos himself, that according to many sources and CNBC News was the one that actually stopped his newspaper, the Washington Post, the newspaper of the intelligentsia, from endorsing Kamala Harris. Yes, you heard that correctly. Even Jeff Bezos himself, who a lot of people are saying made the transition from being a liberal to a conservative, even though I don't believe that kind of larger transition, as some people are saying, he literally just started to work out. He started to lift weights, and then he became more conservative, is not intervening in this year's election, as of course the Washington Post overwhelmingly within the last few years has a long history of supporting the Democrats. All of this as Donald Trump now is doubling down on replacing the income tax with tariffs, which would essentially mean if you buy American-made and manufactured products, you would be living completely tax-free, something that is an absolutely incredible policy. Now, I don't like tariffs, but getting rid of the income tax? You're speaking my love language here. Are you kidding me? As he was asked about this directly from Joe Rogan, and he responded immediately, as there was rumors about this before the interview, and then him releasing it and doubling down and admitting it was a major big deal.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were we serious about that?
Yeah, sure. But why not? Because ready? Our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was really beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless they pay a big price. And the big price is tariffs. And he'd speak like that, but he was right. And then around in the early 1900s, they switched over stupidly to, frankly, an income tax. And you know why? Because countries were putting a lot of pressure on America. We don't want to pay tariffs. Please don't you? You know, believe me, they control our politicians.
And abolishing the income tax? Yeah, please. We need less theft in our life here, as of course this interview went on for 3+ hours. A very powerful interview that in the making of this video, just one day after being released, has garnered 27.9 million views and is expected to be one of the biggest podcast episodes ever. As of course, this 3-hour meeting was absolutely incredible to see. Unscripted, in the flow conversations between some of the most important people in the world, as of course this was a major blow against Kamala Harris that a lot of people are saying ain't no way she could stand and do an interview for that long. As of course the corporate media really isn't happy about this, as CBS News today is being attacked for their Here's What to Know About Trump Rogan podcast, where they literally tried to tell people what to think about a podcast episode. As Joe Concha on Twitter said, well, for starters, it releases the entire show without edits in the name of transparency, unlike, 60 Minutes. Directly responding to CBS News that is being heavily criticized for editing significantly their Kamala Harris interview to make her look better. Rob Schneider says, why do liberal Democrats media feel like it's necessary to think for us? As an independent journalist and podcaster myself, it's pretty awesome seeing independent media outside of the control grid narratives of mainstream media actually gain some significance here. You see literal podcast episodes become more prominent than actually mainstream media interviews, which is a larger signal towards nature healing and society fixing itself, as of course these larger independent sources that don't edit, that don't script, that don't put on fake PR shows for the establishment are really the way to go in these larger kind of political cycles. It is absolutely awesome. It is absolutely incredible to see this larger kind of entertainment and media transformation that individuals like Joe Rogan are leading, creating a pathway for all of us to, of course, absolutely dominate and take the lunch of the corporate media. As RFK Jr. had a lot to say about the cultural significance of all this, as Donald Trump didn't shy away from some of the criticisms of him, as he even specifically described John Bolton, as Trump admitted, a donor got me to appoint him. That donor, Sheldon Adelson, as Donald Trump later went on and described how, quote, he's a really bad guy. And, quote, this time I'm not going to do that. Now, whether you believe him or not, at least we have the facts on record here. At least we have a legitimate conversation. At least we have a moment in time here where we have some transparency and truth when in previous administrations, we wouldn't have any of it. RFK elaborates more here.
Now, I was listening this morning to this extraordinary interview that Donald Trump did with Joe Rogan yesterday. And if you haven't heard that, I think you need to listen to it. Americans need to listen to it. It's going to change a lot of opinions for anybody who's changeable. And listen to it. It's going to change their opinion of who Donald Trump is because he was able to speak with such breadth of knowledge and such granular knowledge about so many wide-ranging issues that he wasn't choosing. This was not the kind of scripted interviews you see with Kamala Harris. This was open season on Donald Trump, and he fielded every question with brilliance, with his authenticity that is completely inaccessible to Kamala Harris.
This says, of course, everyone's still waiting for that Kamala Harris Joe Rogan podcast, as Joe Rogan publicly made statements saying that she didn't say no, but she also didn't say yes to a 3-hour conversation with Joe Rogan, as everyone's kind of waiting here to see what's going to happen, as Joe Rogan wants to interview her, and so do a lot of other very prominent, powerful Democrats that are now, according to the Daily Mail, panicking and urging her to appear on the show, especially after the 28 million people have tuned in to listen directly to the former president of the United States. Obviously, this episode is a major political and cultural juggernaut, as a very desperate Kamala Harris might actually do this. As, of course, everyone right now is toting around her podcast appearance episode on Call Her Daddy that got 685,000 views in 2 weeks. Now, Donald Trump's interview, literally in over 24 hours, 28 million views. Kamala Harris on a podcast episode that the corporate media can't stop talking about. 685,000 views? That's it. This does highlight the larger kind of polarity in this political season, as Trump now is expected to jam-pack Madison Square Garden in New York City, as he is not even campaigning in swing states. He's going to New York, a place that is overwhelmingly Democratic, and launching a major rally there that a lot of very powerful people are going to be in attendance in. As, of course, Tucker Carlson is going to be there, Elon Musk, Tony Hinchcliffe, and a lot of other prominent luminaries in the political and social media sphere, as jam-packing Madison Square Garden is something that is a larger PR stunt and move that, of course, is going to galvanize a lot of attention, especially in the heart of a liberal woke city in total disarray. The total disarray part is just my own extrapolation. As a former New Yorker, this is absolutely fascinating and interesting to see. As it's also important to note here that we are still not out of the woods yet, and there's a lot of insanity here that could come our way at any moment, at any time. As, of course, a lot of people expect Donald Trump to come in there and everything's going to be fine and everything's going to be smooth in between November 5th and January 6th. As, of course, a lot of very prominent people who are going to be held accountable, who are going to be called out, who are going to face criminal charges, will do everything they can in order to, of course, not to do that. As there are some larger dangers in our society that Mike Pence specifically highlighted on the latest episode that he recently did with Tim Pool.
So is your sense that on, say, January 20th, if Trump does win clearly in the election, is your sense that on January 20th, Trump will be inaugurated or no?
This period between November 5th and January 6th is going to be extremely intense. If Trump wins, my sense is that you will see street paramilitary, left-wing / never Trump, right even potentially. You're going to see this sort of summer 2020 style riot force start to break out on the streets. The media is going to portray them as pro-democracy groups who are protesting the illegitimacy of the Trump Electoral College victory. So that's going to shut down the country. It's going to start terrorizing people. It's going to start preventing people from being able to communicate. You're going to see pressure put on the social media companies, extreme pressure put on by the Justice Department, put on by the advertiser networks. You're going to see this crisis response. It's going to feel like this country is, it's going to feel like the day after January 6th for 2 months if Trump does indeed win the Electoral College, in order for them to prime the pump for their extraordinary actions on January 6th.
Yep, and that's something that, of course, we've been talking about here on this particular YouTube channel for a while. We just had Mike Pence here in studio for a larger podcast episode. You could see clips on that on this particular YouTube channel, and that's the larger kind of situation that we're involved in, as we kept reminding people, hey, even if you win November 5th, the craziness, it's not going to end. It's only going to increase and get more hyperbolic, more insane from here, as, of course, we're seeing a lot of very heated rhetoric from the left, specifically going after Donald Trump, comparing him to the leader of Germany in the 1930s, as the Biden-Harris administration keeps talking about how he's going to be an authoritarian, he's going to be a fascist, when in reality, the Biden-Harris regime just expanded domestic military authority to include lethal force against Americans. This, as the Department of Defense now has the power to step in and use lethal force within U.S. borders, even against its own citizens, after a new directive that was just released by the United States government a few days ago, with the approval that is soon expected by the Secretary of Defense, as RFK previously warned about this at the TPUSA conference. While Kamala Harris's record is being absolutely questioned, as there's a new bombshell advertisement specifically describing her record as California prosecutor, where she specifically went after parents whose children were truant and weren't showing up to schools. Yes, you heard that correctly. Kamala Harris put people in jail. There's one particular story of one child being sick and ill, and police officers literally showing up to the house of this mother that has to deal with a sick child and putting her in jail because of the policies that were implemented by Kamala Harris.
Cops wanted to arrest me. As a matter of fact, they did.
And frankly, the prosecutors in my office who volunteered to do this? My homicide prosecutors, my gang prosecutors. And they went over there, and I said, when you go over there, look really mean.
She had me arrested and prosecuted because my handicapped daughter was sick in the hospital and had missed some days of school.
I learned that with the swipe of my pen, I could charge someone with the lowest level offense. That person could be arrested. They could lose time from work, and their family maybe lose their job. They'd have to come out of their own pocket to help hire a lawyer. They'd lose standing in their community.
I lost my job and couldn't pay rent, and we got evicted.
Yeah, absolute government tyrannical evil. But what did you expect from Kamala Harris that literally previously described the need to lower the Earth's population?
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Yeah, how are you going to reduce the population there? As of course now we understand why Bill Gates is giving her tens of millions of dollars to her super PACs and political campaigns here. As of course he also believes that there's too many people in this world, when of course scientifically speaking, a lot of it is mumbo jumbo, a lot of it is made up, and a lot of it goes back and stems from eugenics and the larger science of population control that, of course, has been pioneered by a lot of elitist eugenicists that want to see less people in this earth. As Elon Musk has previously described the two sides of these larger political factions as some are extinctionists and some are expansionists. What side are you on? As of course, I think this election will be deciding that, as a lot of people aren't really happy with Kamala Harris, as even her own supporters are kind of pissed off as they were expecting a performance from Beyonce recently, and in Houston, that really didn't happen, as of course she came on stage, gave a little, very short speech. According to some reports, she was paid multi-millions of dollars in order to do so, as a lot of the crowd was kind of left stunned here, asking, "Where's my Beyonce concert?" As 30,000 people showed up, waited in line.
That's the epitome of a bait and switch right there. And it happened twice. She did it in Detroit with Eminem. Instead of him, it's so hilarious, Scott, because like Eminem has rapped about some heavy topics, right? All the way up to like chainsaws and babies. But when he thinks about Trump, oh man, it just fries his brain that he can't get his words straight. No, I think maybe you don't have good reasons for those feelings. That's a big part of it right there.
Yeah, it's frustrating, man. Like he's what you call safe dangerous these days. And of course, you know, there was a time and a place where he was stood firm in defense of the First Amendment, and I'll always respect him for that. But like, you know, today it's just so cringe, man. I just can't.
Could it be a Diddy tape? Could it be some sort of Diddy tape that's going on?
Could be. And it's, you know, it's really funny is that, you know, I gave his new album a listen, and just because I am like when I was a kid, dude, like of course I was way into like Slim Shady, dude. Like that was like my childhood, and so his album drops and I listen to it, and it's like the stuff that he is edgy on is like, you know, it's the approved topics. Like you can make fun of handicapped people, and apparently, I don't know, but in his little paradigm, but it's very insightful into their worldview. It's like, here's this little box of people that you can make fun of, but if you dare make fun of these people over here, it's just like if those people are on the table, then everybody needs to be on the table, right?
It's a little hypocrisy, I think.
Yeah.
So I think the people who went expecting Beyonce to give a free concert, like, they believe a lot of stuff is not true. I get disappointed all the time. If you thought that Beyonce was going to go give a free concert just to promote Kamala, I mean, there's a lot of money involved in such things, and I'm sure there's a fee for her to do that. Kamala didn't seem to be shelling out that fee. She's probably going to keep it for her next job because, you know, she's going to be out of work soon. She's not going to be the vice president anymore. And she might have to go back to McDonald's. You know, there has been a circulating picture of her in her McDonald's outfit, which proves that she worked at McDonald's. And we're going to take a look at that later. We also have a clip tonight because we're just trying to be objective. We have a clip that says 9 irrefutable ways that Trump is Hitler. Like we're going to put it in the time capsule tonight. We want to see both sides, and we want to understand the example of everyone knowing about the Call Her Daddy podcast. It only has 600K views versus Trump 28 million views in 24 hours, and they're not even talking about it. That is an example of the mainstream media magnifying glass. They could take something that really doesn't affect 99% of people, like a lot of their agenda, by the way, is this. And they can make it say, look, there's this group and they're downtrodden and we have to protect them and their rights are more important than your rights. And we're just going to reverse racism. Like a racism had been like turned way down in this country. And then they're like, let's bring it back, but reverse it, right? Let's make skin color a thing and let's have a hierarchy. And the lighter your skin color, the less rights you have, which is a reversion and is equally as abhorrent as what happened in the 1800s and earlier, pretty much for all of human history. So slavery's bad. This is the Democratic Party that traditionally supported slavery and continues to, you know, gaslight their own people because everyone outside of that bubble doesn't believe that Beyonce is going to show up or any of this type of stuff. It's their people that believe the untruths. They're the people that believe that Trump loves Hitler. Oh, he loves Hitler. No, he said Autobahns are pretty cool, right? Okay, so you could translate that and bend that into, you know, because Hitler under his regime made some really fast highways, right? Like, but you really have to do some gymnastics mentally to do that. And if you're so nimble mentally, why don't you just grab on the reality and hang on and work with that instead of dealing with all this mythical, legendary fiction that they deal with. They're almost like her entire like platform is just like especially in the last couple of weeks, is just like anti-Trump. Like, just vote for me because you hate Trump.
Yeah.
It's and that goes back to the MSM magnifying glass. It's only a small group that are that polarized with the derangement syndrome. Everyone else is like, I don't want a leader who worked at McDonald's for a profession, right? I'll take one that worked there 15 minutes or whatever, but I don't need a leader to really relate to my everyday struggle or to have worked at McDonald's. I want someone who can keep this country from crashing and burning under the weight of the globalist agenda, which has wholeheartedly infected our towns and communities and infrastructure and all this other stuff that is really a chained piece of concrete to America's feet as we get taken to the river. So anything that cracks that concrete up, they call Trump fascist, but Hitler wasn't a fascist. So how can he be Hitler, who was a socialist, and Mussolini was a fascist, right? So like if you're going to use labels, they have to mean something. And the Democrats have used all their labels out. No one cares at this point. If you call him Hitler or you say Madison Square Garden is just like they had the Hitler rally back in the 30s, you could say all this stuff. It's still not going to work. And people are just going to have a worse taste in their mouth from the agenda that's being spewed out there. Because it's not about rebuilding things and making things stronger. It's just her saying there's nothing I would change from the past 4 years, which is so hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so crazy. And I'm just looking here. So now I've got my new favorite tool. All of you guys out there, did you know you can get the thumbs down button back, or the views on it on there's a Chrome extension that'll give you how many thumbs down are in each video. So I'm looking at the Trump video, currently at 31.2 million views, 1.6 million thumbs up, 36,000 thumbs down. So that's a pretty good ratio to one direction.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at the Call Her Daddy podcast, Vice President Kamala Harris, which is interesting. Now, it's only like, is this just a clip? It says 7 minutes, 53 seconds. Was it only a 7-minute podcast?
No, I think the girl who did it took it down afterwards.
Okay, yeah,
she faced such backlash.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the full video here. So there's a 7-minute clip on here, which has 710,000 views, and not even a million views, 18,000 thumbs up, 89,000 thumbs down. And so this just gives you the full picture here. Like, people are just like, whatever, like, that's just been the media's job, is to paint this fictitious portrayal of a reality that doesn't exist, and that used to be how Twitter was too, like the Twitter landscape really amplified this ideology that just really doesn't exist. It's so crazy to look behind the curtain now and be able to see it for what it is.
Yeah, and the other aspect is those numbers, what were the numbers on the Call Her Daddy podcast? It was like 17,000 yes, 89,000 no.
Yeah, 18,000 thumbs up, 89.
If you were an entrepreneur taking your offer to the market, those are good numbers. If you're running for president and you go to a safe place to get some like love from the community, those are not good numbers. Right. If you're making your offer, like, yeah, you could afford for, a lot of people to say no to your offer as long as a substantial portion say yes. In her case, she needs all those people saying no to say yes to support her cause. And that was supposed to be, like I said, a friendly territory for an interview. And I would also suspect some people just sought it out and probably gave it a thumbs down that didn't even listen to it.
Of course, which, as they should. Absolutely. But what the funny thing is that I know, so I would think that the other side who hate Trump would be more inclined to go out of their way to thumbs down the Joe Rogan episode without listening to it too. And even within that, it's just this massive ratio. So crazy.
The other thing is, they're saying that like Trump's going to take over and he's going to be a dictator. Do you think they really believe that?
No. Well, okay. And again, it's like this surface level programming that gets put in their head, and they're not even allowed to think beyond it. And it's so interesting because of that and just everything across the board. This is their strategy, is that they attack him on things that he doesn't even represent. Like, I was up in Clarksville, which is about 45 minutes north of here, over the weekend. And
did you take the last train to get there? Last train to Clarksville.
There you go. But I was driving through town, and there was multiple billboards that said "Stop Trump's Project 2025," paid for by the Clarksville, Democratic Party. And it's like,
we already did. It's already done. Take down your billboard.
Done. Yeah, everywhere he goes, he talks about disavow. Nobody in that whole thing is going to be on my thing, and it's just like, it's crazy. It's they just attack him over and over. Every single thing that they attack him on is a lie, a fabrication, a misinterpretation, an edited clip, and it's just, they got nothing, man.
Well, I mean, because here's kind of my point in asking the question, because I think it's a healthy question to ask. Do the people that control the Biden administration really see Trump as a danger to their infrastructure, that he could like run away with it and never give their toys back, right? Because that's what they're afraid of. So that's a legit question. And in trying to answer that question, I came across the new directive that Trump just mentioned about the posse comitatus and how they're going to have the government allowed to shoot you, right? Because it used to be you couldn't use U.S. military on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens. The Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, just, I'm pretty sure, changed that law. We're going to look at the story tonight because there's a couple people who reported on it. And if Trump's about to take over, why would they give Trump and the government the ability to kill them? That's a really strange thing to do when you're about to hand things over to Hitler, potentially. So if they really believe he's Hitler, why would they do that and not even use it during their administration? I'm hypothesizing because they have a couple months left. And they could. This could be something happens like if the election goes the wrong way for them, then they use that new statute 5042.1268, whatever it is. We'll learn it later. I was just making up a number there for placeholder. That's my placeholder thought. So I want to look at that because posse comitatus has been a long-standing rule for a reason. And if anyone goes trying to turn, it's like someone coming into your house, you have security set up, and they're like, hey, let's just turn some of the security off. Let's just see what happens, right? Those people might be planning to jack your establishment when they're doing stuff like that. And you should recognize criminal activity early so you don't get bitten by it and have to call the police so that you can file a report. Okay? Because that's how that works. In this situation, if Trump is really Hitler, why would you give him this type of custody, powers, etc.? We'll get to that.
Everyone's doing some kind of self-help these days, and you can find a million self-help courses out there. Most other courses out there are hosting lectures. They're hosting videos, they're maybe even doing Q&As, and these are great starting points to encourage learning. But at Autonomy, we believe that hands-on practice is the best way to really lock in what we're learning. There's no better way to gain confidence and mastery than through action. After each lecture, we practice the concepts we've learned with other students, giving and receiving feedback in a non-judgmental environment. The result is mastery of concepts like entrepreneurship, ethical sales, and self-reliance in an environment that directly translates to the real world. Plus, you make connections with other like-minded individuals who are learning right alongside you, and you have a lifetime membership in the community. The Autonomy course with Richard Grove equips you with confidence, competence, and courage in a world filled with confusion and noise. You can learn more at getautonomy.info. We'll see you there.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall
weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come